All right, everyone. Hello. Hello. So thank you so much for being here today. My name is Victoria Meek, and I'm part of the team here at the Mississippi Arts Commission. I'm the Executive Assistant and Special Initiatives Director. And a little bit about the Arts Commission. We are the official grants making and service agency for the arts in our state. And each year we are funded by the Mississippi Legislature and the National Endowment for the Arts. We use the support to provide grants and programming that advance the arts in our state. And just a quick side note, we do have a grant round opening February 1st and closing March 1st. For more information, visit arts.ms.gov/grants. We will share that link in the chat and encourage you to contact us with any questions about that process. We're hosting a session today as part of an ongoing series called Ask a Professional. We invite speakers to present on topics relevant to the path of an artist or arts-minded organization. The topic today will be Record Keeping 101, and it will be led by Joyce Martelli. As we move through the presentation, we hope you'll have some questions. Please share those using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I'll monitor those, and when there's a break for questions, I'll recite them for Joyce to answer. We also have closed captioning enabled. You can click on the live transcript button to the right and choose to show subtitles or hide them. There's also a chat box where you can leave comments and chat with each other. Please don't put questions for Joyce in the chat box, but if you do, don't worry. My colleague Lauren Rhodes will remind you to put them in the Q&A. To introduce our speaker, I'll go ahead and stop sharing. Joyce Martelli is a fiber artist and lives in Rochester, New York. Her art journey began with music as a graduate of the University of New Hampshire in music education. After teaching for several years, she returned to school to obtain an accounting degree from Rochester Institute of Technology and became a certified public accountant. Since then, she has been able to combine her love of teaching and financial ability to support nonprofit organizations and small business owners. Thank you so much for being here today, Joyce.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this. So I guess I'm ready to start. I am very grateful for this opportunity, and it's fulfilling both of my loves, being able to work with artists and also teaching. I went into public accounting against my better thoughts of myself, because being an artist, that's one side of my brain, and being an accountant, as many people think of accountants as being boring and stuffy, I was hoping to bring new life to that group. And I think I accomplished that. And since it was hard for me to learn a new ability, a new skill, accounting, when that was not part of my makeup, I feel like I can get the point across to those who do not have a financial thought in their head other than money coming in and money going out. So putting this together, I have a PowerPoint presentation that I will share. And again, just as a reminder, please feel free to put any questions that you have in the Q&A, and I will do my best to answer them. And slideshow. Okay, so we as individuals have a choice, or we have choices, such as do we create art or the business of record keeping for art? And unfortunately, we have to do both. Some of us have a brain that works on both sides, some do not. But I'm hoping with this presentation that I'll be able to show you ways of keeping track of the business side of your art, so that either you can hand it over to an accountant or you feel sufficient that you can do it yourself. So the main question is, why do we have to keep records? And I'm going to hide that. I don't think there we go. The main reason that you want to keep track of your art expenses is so that you know how to price your art. It's one thing to make art, and then the first thing you know, somebody is saying, oh, I would love to buy that piece. and you're thinking, I don't even know what to charge, because you're not in the practice of keeping track of your expenses, especially when you first start. So that's one of the main reasons that as artists, we need to be aware of what we are purchasing to make our art, plus that and how much time it takes, and our own self-worth. All of this comes into pricing the art. But if you can't start with your expenses, you've got to at least cover that. You've got to be aware of what you are spending. The other reason too, and as Victoria had mentioned, if you're going to apply for a grant, you need to know what you need as far as being supportive in this grant. So if they're giving you a grant to create a mural, let's say, what are the cost of your supplies? What's the cost of your time? What are the different items that you need, so that you can ask the grantor for that amount to cover your cost? The other thing too is there's sales tax to be paid, and this needs to be factored into your art. The reason sales tax is so important is, I know in New York this has happened, so I'm sure it's happened in other states, that there are agents of the sales tax authority that go around to different shows or restaurants or any place of business, and they check to see if you're charging sales tax. In New York, we have to have a certificate that's shown. So if I'm at a show, I have to have my sales tax certificate up there so that people can see that I am collecting sales tax and I do turn it into the state. So the sales tax authority will look for that. And like I said, if they come in and they purchase something and you don't charge them sales tax, then it's a gotcha. And you could be responsible for the sales that they think you have based on a factor, and also the tax that they think you owe, whether you've collected it or not. And the same with the federal taxes. If you are reporting your income and they feel that it's not the correct income, if you're audited, they may come in again and assess your records to see if you owe more to the federal government, the same with the sales tax. So again, you don't want either of these authorities to come in and estimate your income and not have any expenses to set off for that income, and also for them to say you've made X amount of income. Now, is this important if you are doing your art for your own purposes and periodically you sell something to family or friends? Well, that's a decision that you have to make. But if you're going to report your income to the federal tax, it's called Schedule C for the federal. And I'm not going to talk about the state because I don't know the Mississippi rules. But for federal tax, if you file a Schedule C saying that you're running your art as a business, then you need to be able to provide them not only the income, but those expenses against your income, so that you're paying not gross taxes or gross income and paying taxes on that, but paying your net income. And again, if you're just doing this as a hobby and like once in a while you will sell a piece, like I said, family or friends or an acquaintance, then that's your decision as to how much you want to keep track and whether you follow a Schedule C. With the Schedule C, after I think 5 years, if you have not shown a profit, then what happens is that the IRS will say, well, it's just a hobby, and any income that you've paid or any income tax that you've paid, you would have to work with an accountant, a CPA, to see if you can get a refund for that, or if you may possibly even owe taxes because you had an expense on there. But again, rather than get into those details, which record keeping 101 does not cover, this is just something to think about and something to work with your own personal CPA. So what do we need to do to keep track of our income, our expenses? And that's exactly what we have to do, is to keep track of the money coming in, that's coming in, especially if it's on a regular basis, and then the expense of doing your art. And then we will also get into later in the presentation a record keeping system that you can use either manual or computer. All the systems that I'm going to show you are going to be very, very simple, because remember, your business is creating art, not spending hours and hours in front of the computer or in a record keeping system that's manual to keep track of everything. So first, we're going to talk about income. When you think of income, generally you think of what you are paying, what is being paid to you for your artwork. But there's other income that comes in also, which I have listed here: prize money, any awards that you get. If you're in a show and you win Best of Show or Surface Design Award for Best Surface Design, any fellowships that you get, grant money, teaching fees, even if you only teach once in a while, royalties, if you have art that's being sold because you've mass produced it. And also, you've got to think about commission work. I know when I first started, I was doing quite a bit of commission work, and I really didn't think of that as income until it became a pretty regular source of income for me. And at that point, then I had to keep track of the commission work. And when I say advanced payments, one of the things that you want to think of as an artist is, if you are doing commission work, you want to have some money up front. Even though the piece has not been finished, it's always a good idea to ask for a certain amount of payment up front, because you are putting some work in. And if for some reason the commission work ends, the person decides to walk away, you do have a payment that covers your costs up to that point. When you are looking at your income, you also want to keep in mind your sales tax that you are collecting on all of this. Again, there are some things that you have to collect sales tax on, some that you do not. Amounts that are paid to you for your artwork, yes, you have to pay sales tax on. Payments as far as commission work, yes, you have to pay sales tax on. The others it would depend on your state. And when you are trying to keep track of the sales tax, one of the things that you want to remember is how much it costs you to actually have your artwork made. What are you charging for the piece that you're creating and selling? The sales tax goes on top of that, depending on the percentage that your state is telling you that you have to pay to them. You want to always keep that separate, because what happens, even though you're collecting the sales tax, you're turning around and paying it to someone else. So you're a third party go-between, and that's not really your income. So in paying taxes, if you're at that point, you want to pay you want to have your exact income, not what you're paying out to a federal organization. So first of all, what I'd like to cover is, what do we need to do to track our income? And I'm going to break this down into income, and then we're going to go into expenses, and then we'll go into some record keeping. So for right now, let's talk about what we need to do to record the income. What is important? Why do we have to keep it? And what type of evidence do we have to have? So art that's sold, you need to have the date of the payment that you receive. So if you're selling the art on September 30th, that's the date that your payment was received. You have to have the price of your artwork, and then you have to have the price of the sales tax collected. And notice I have those separate. While we're on that, if you include the sales tax in your price, you still have to know what the percentage is that is being paid to sales tax. So for instance, if you're selling your piece for $400 and the sales tax in your locale is 8%, I could have picked something easier, let's say 10%. And you have to collect that 10% on your artwork. That's what is paid out to somebody else. Your price of your artwork is still $400. It's also good to have a description of the item that you sold. For instance, if you are an artist that sells original work, but you also are a fiber artist that you've taken photos and you sell photos of your work, or you've put them on note cards, or you've made banners or pieces of clothing, and all of this is in your artwork, then you want to be able to go back and know what was the piece that you sold. As a fiber artist, I always put down the name of the piece that I sell. That way it's one of a kind, and I can say, I sold the blues, and I know I sold the blues and it was this price, and I have all that information. It's also important to know the forms of payment that you have. You always want to mark down whether it's cash, credit card, or check. And while we're on that form of payment, you do not need to take pictures of cash. And I say that in a laughing manner because I work with some nonprofits that as they're keeping track of the income that comes in, their payments, they take pictures of the cash that comes in. It's like, first of all, you're not supposed to do that. It is it's a federal law that you don't take pictures of cash. And the other thing, that does not give me any proof, or any accountant or IRS agent, any proof that you actually collected that cash. With a credit card, you do not want to keep the entire number of that credit card in your files. The last 4 digits is fine. But if you have the name of the person that's paying you, that is all that you need. And of course, the check is the other form. And if you want to take a photo of that check, that is fine also. So those things are what you need if you're selling the piece of art. That's just the start. And that's the same with any income that you receive. You want to be able to put down the date of the payment that you received it, a description of what that was, whether it was teaching at Mississippi Art Council or royalties that you're getting or grant, and also the name of the person or entity making that payment, which I just mentioned. And again, the form of payment is the same. Now, I know sometimes you don't have that information, or it's like, what else can I have? Well, you can always have receipts. If you're selling artwork, you want to have some kind of a receipt book that you can write out that I sold, well, not I sold, but one piece of art, the blues, the amount of the payment, and then that receipt is given to the person that buys the art, but also you keep a copy. Letters will work. If you're getting payments from a grant or royalties, teaching, as long as you have a letter stating how much you're being paid and why, that's a good receipt for the type of payment that you're receiving. So let's go into expenses. As artists, we have some very unusual expenses that we can take off that a lot of Schedule Cs or other businesses do not have. And that's because of the art supplies that we use. And things like, if you're into pottery, the clay that you use, the equipment that you use, a spinner's wheel. As a fiber artist, I have expenses not only for my fabric, but also for paper and ink. I take off the expense of any printing that I have to do outside the home. I take off the ink that I use at home on my printer. So those are unusual expenses that if you're not an artist, you wouldn't normally have on your return. And what the government says is the items to run a business, it's ordinary and necessary. So it's the ordinary things that you purchase, everyday supplies, and they're necessary for you to be able to create your art. And I'm going to show you a list here in a moment, but it is not an all-inclusive list. So remember, your business is the creation of art. So any deductions that you use or any expenses that you use in your business are deductible. And as you're getting used to this, if you ever have any questions on whether that's really an expense, like one that comes up often is, well, what about the clothes that I buy when I'm creating my art? Those are not deductible. Those are just old paint clothes or old clay clothes. Those are not deductible, your own normal clothes. But if you have any expenses that you're not quite sure, then keep the receipt and talk to your tax preparer. So here's just a small list. This is not all inclusive, but these are the types of things that as artists, sometimes we don't think about as being a deduction. And I am not going to go through this list and read it to you, but a couple of things that I want to point out to you. If you're traveling and teaching or going to shows, you want to keep in mind that, a certain amount of your meals, that's an expense of you doing business as an artist, and that's deductible. And a lot of times we don't think of our own home studios. You may be fortunate enough that you have a studio outside of your home, and then obviously that rent that you pay is deductible. But what about your own home studio? Mine is in my basement, and I go by square footage as to what the square footage is. And then I can work with utilities and all of that to keep that studio running downstairs. But also it is dedicated. So if you're using the dining room as your creative table, your creative space, you're really not going to be able to take that off as a home studio deduction. But if you have a room that you have dedicated to your work, then that is deductible. And the other thing too is the travel. If you're traveling to a show because you are the artist there, you want to make sure, even if it's even if you're traveling by car, keep a record of your expense so that you can take that off if you are doing a Schedule C. But also it's important, all of these are important when you're talking about how do I price my work. These are all expenses that come into play. One of the things that I do that if I'm in a show and I have to travel far overnight, I will factor in a certain percentage to travel to that show because I've got to cover that expense. So my art may be priced a little higher if I go to, say, Florida and sell my art as opposed to staying here in New York and selling my art. And that's decisions too that you have to think about as an artist and covering your expenses. Again, if you are not in the art arena to do business, then these are things that you want to think about as far as pricing, but it's not something you need to keep track of. And again, I will mention that another expense that you have is that collecting of sales tax. That's not only collected by you, but that is an expense that will be deducted from you. So I know I've covered a lot as far as income and expenses. So I'd like to take a break right here and ask if there's any questions that anyone has.
So I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A box right now. I don't know if we wanted to wait to see if anyone wanted to type one in, but yeah, I haven't gotten any questions.
We have a question in the chat, Victoria. Do you want to read it?
Yes, thanks, Lauren. Okay, so from Linda Chandler, what if I don't have employees and I do everything myself? How can I use that to get a tax credit?
Well, you can't. If you do not have any employees, you're not paying payroll, you're not paying any, you're not paying anyone, so you're not paying the benefits for them. It's not you don't have an expense. When you're asking about a tax credit, I'm not sure what you're talking about as far as a tax credit. Like I said, if you don't have the expense, then you don't have a deduction. Did that answer the question? She can type back.
She did. Okay. She did
Okay.
clarify if that was a deductible. So a tax credit or deductible.
No. Yeah.
Got it.
If you don't have an employee, if you're doing everything yourself, then you do not have a deduction. A deduction or an expense is only something that you are paying out. And it doesn't have to be a regular employee. Let's say that one thing that you will find, especially in nonprofits, you may pay somebody to come in, well, let's say once a week and clean your studio, or put your income and expenses into a system, or to do filing or whatever, and you're paying that person. They're not necessarily, they are not, let me clarify that, they are not an employee. It's just somebody that you paid to come in and help you do something. Maybe you've got somebody come in cutting paper for you, or cutting material a certain way, anything that you're hiring them to help you with your business, and it's just a one-off or maybe once in a while, then definitely that is an expense. With that expense, though, you want to keep in mind that anybody that you pay $300 or more, then you need to do other tax forms, not only for yourself showing the expense, but also so that person can claim it on their income tax, because that's money that they're receiving that's income. And again, that gets, there's a lot of complexity there. So you just want to remember that if you're paying somebody more than $300, there's additional forms that you have to complete.
Okay, so we have another question, kind of continuing what you were just speaking about. It's in the Q&A box. So Blake Barnes, he was given a grant by the Mississippi Arts Commission for a comic book featuring several Mississippi artists. With the money from the grant and donation from sponsors and local crowdfunding endeavors, he was able to contract 7 artists for the book. 2 of these artists were paid at least $600. I have been informed that I may need to send these 2 artists a 1099-NEC. However, after a lot of researching online, I found multiple sources that say I should not send a 1099-NEC since I paid them through PayPal, and that PayPal will send them a 1099-K. Some sources—
And that is—
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Some sources said if I send them a 1099-NEC and PayPal also sends them a 1099-K, it's possible to get reported double the amount, and we don't want that. So the question is, do I need to send these contract artists who I paid $600 and above? Do I need to send them 1099-NECs, or do I not, and just let PayPal send them a 1099-K?
The answer to that is you do not need to send them one. Since PayPal is taking care of that for you, I would do my due diligence to make sure that they have indeed sent that out. And you can do that several ways. There may be a way that you can contact PayPal, or they'll send you a report of what they have sent 1099-Ks out. The other thing that I would do is I would send a letter to inform the artist that you have paid that they will be receiving a 1099-K from PayPal. You most definitely do not want to give them a 1099 EC and have PayPal send one. They will take that as a double income. So that good question. Congratulations on your grant money. Anything else?
We do have a few more questions.
Okay, let's go.
From Austin Chester. When does it become worthwhile to report income from art? And how does that relate to the forming of an LLC?
That's a good question. And I'll tell you what I did. When I got to the point where I was in more than an occasional show, when I was selling at least one piece a quarter and looking at the amount of income that was coming in from that, I decided that I needed to report it as a Schedule C. I'm still at the Schedule C phase. I haven't found the need to go into an LLC. And that type of question, I would say you would need to work with an accountant in your area. The state laws play in a lot with the federal, but you want to make sure that you don't get caught up and not have the right information for the state. So on that one, I'm going to say find an accountant, and I have this further on. Find an accountant that knows the art world, not someone that does not understand artists. And it's not that we're a hard group to understand, but they're going to be more aware of the type of expenses, the type of question that you have. When should I change from a Schedule C into an LLC? Or maybe an LLC is not the correct way to go. There's other ways of reporting and becoming an entity rather than being an LLC. But that is a question that I would go to someone in your area that has worked with artists before.
Okay. We have a question from Stephanie. As a choreographer, there are different ways of charging or being paid for artistic work. I've never heard of sales tax on choreography. Any thoughts?
There usually will not be sales tax on choreography. Sales tax is on a product. You're providing a service. So that's a clear definition there as far as sales tax. Make sure that it's a product. It's something that's tangible that you can hold. Your choreography is not sales tax. Is not sales taxable. But again, you want to check the rules in your state to make sure that that is not qualifying for sales tax.
Got it. We have a question from Joe Patterson. What about donating a painting for a charity event? What part can you claim for expenses?
Whatever it cost you to make the piece. The same as if you not only donated it, but if you were selling it, you still have expenses that go along with the creation of that piece. And what will happen is as far as the income, you will have no income from it, but you do have expenses. Don't confuse, and thank you for that question. Your income is what you are receiving at a point in time. And it's because you've worked on your art, you've created, and now you have sold the product. But the expenses that you have will be more than the artwork that you have sold, because you have pieces in progress. You have pieces that have not sold. So it's any expense that you have at a point in time from, let's say, well, we're working on a calendar year. Any expenses that you put into the business from January 1 through December 31st, that is the expense of you doing business as an artist, whether you have sold the piece or not, whether you have given the piece as a donation. You will want to write down that you have donated certain pieces, but that's the income side. You will have, I have much more income, much more expenses than I do income, and that's okay. It just provides a loss for your business, which goes back to that thing that I said earlier. You want to make sure that if you are recording as a business, that you have a year that you are showing a profit, because if not, then the government's going to come back and say, you're just a hobby. Okay, I hope I answered that well for you.
She did ask a clarifying question, about referring to what part can you claim for expenses. She asked, so only the supplies and not the value of the painting?
Right, just the supplies.
Okay.
Because you're donating it, so you have no income coming in.
Got it. We have a question from Latrice. Will I still be able to get a tax reduction for my home studio space if it does not match the location of my LLC?
Good question. I'm going to say yes, but can I have a little bit more information as far as why the LLC is one address and the studio is another?
Okay. Let's see. We'll see if Latrice will. Do we want to wait for Latrice to offer more information or go to another?
Go to another question. Let's give her a chance to come back.
Oh, okay. So she clarified. I moved last year and haven't updated forms yet.
That's fine. Yes, it's fine that if your forms are not updated and your studio is in one place, but you have not updated your records, yes, you need to take off the expense of your studio.
Got it.
The other reason too is you may have a storefront where you're just selling your work, but the actual work is done in your studio at home. That's fine too.
Got it. From Linda, how much money do I need to make as an author and artist to file taxes?
Going back to the question that was there earlier, that is up to you. You have to put a value on your own work, and I can't say, nor could any accountant, I don't think, say that you after you make X amount of money, then you are an artist, you are an author, and you need to start filing taxes. Again, that's one of the questions that, when you're at that point where you're trying to decide which to do, to find somebody that can talk to you about the rules of your state, the laws of your state.
Got it.
Any other questions?
I am seeing one from Elizabeth. How many years can you report negative income before you have to report profit?
If I remember correctly, I think 5 years. And in those 5 years, and you have to report at least 1 year as a profit. And the profit can be small, just as long as you have a profit. I think I can get back to you on that. I'll send that information to Victoria, but I think it's 5 years.
Got it. And we've gotten one more question.
Okay.
From Kathleen. As a nonprofit organization, you have people asking for donations. Can you do that? And what title would you put that under?
That would be an expense. Well, hang on. No, you would still record that as a non-cash donation. Because remember, you're taking off your expenses. And you can put a value on that piece of work that you're donating to show that. But I would put that as on your income, I would list that as a non-cash donation.
Great. Well, those are all the questions for now.
Okay,
Thanks,
well then let's go on to something that we all hate to do. I'll take that back. I'm sure there are people out there that are not like me and love to organize, and I'm not an organized person. That's why I'm in abstract art. So let's talk about tools for record keeping. What you want to do is remember, you want something, if you're starting out, that's simple and something that you can manage. To get a high-powered computer program that takes you a lot of time to understand and to work with, you're going to become frustrated and you're going to give it up. So what are the things that you need? You need a way and a place to keep your receipts of income, and you need a place to keep all of your expense receipts, and then you need something to put that information in, whether it's a manual or computer. You need to record it in what we call a ledger. And at the bottom, I have 3 ways that you can keep your information. As an accountant and working with a lot of nonprofit businesses and also with individual artists, I always loved when it was tax season at the end of the year, and they would come in and they would have all their information in a shoebox. And as I said here, if you want to make your accountant smile, and there's sarcasm in that, just put it all in a shoebox and give it to your tax preparer at the end of the year. He or she will thank you. At least you've got it in one place, but this is going to cost you more if you turn this over to somebody and say, here everything is, you figure out whether it's an income or an expense. Another way of keeping your information is in the accordion binder, which I've shown. And these are both manual ways of doing it, obviously. You could have an accordion binder, which you can get at Office Max and a lot of other places. Have one for your expenses and have one for your sales. And then the best thing that ever came out is the scanning apps. I know a lot of individuals that what they will do is they get a receipt because they've gone to Blick Art Supply or you know, a local store where you buy your art supplies. They get the invoice or the invoice and they scan it in. So it's right there on their phone or on their computer, and they keep it in a separate file right on their computer. It saves a lot of time. You don't have to go searching. You can even make up your own folders for that. So talking about apps for scanning, not that you can't just do the manual way. And to be honest with you, I still do the manual way. I have a shoebox that I throw all my receipts in. And then once a month, I go back and record them. But a couple of the apps that I have done some research on and have also talked to other artists about how they maintain their information. I've listed 4 that seem to be the very, very top apps for scanning. And Adobe Scan is free. And the old saying, if you get what you pay for, Adobe Scan seems to be pretty good. It's easy to use. Which is what you want to have when you're in working with something new as far as technology. Swift Scan, it automatically stores the information to the document cloud, the Adobe document cloud. Adobe Scan does not. And I think there's a small fee with Swift Scan. There's also something called Microsoft Office Lens. And it's great if you use Microsoft Office Suite. I'm not familiar with Office Lens, but it did come highly recommended by some people. And then as far as Apple products, there is something called Apple Notes that can be used. Again, I am not an Apple user, so I don't have much information, or I don't really know anyone that's used it. Adobe Scan, I do know that people have used that. It's a good start in figuring out how to use it. So I would, in this day of technology, I think I would investigate one of those. But if you don't want to do that, then there's 2 manual ways that you can do this. And again, they're inexpensive, and all you have to do is write them in. There's a thing called a ledger book, and it's actually called an accounting ledger book. And then when you open up the inside, you'll see that it's lined so that you can keep track of the date, the name, the price, or the expense of the item. And you would have a page for your income and another page for your expenses. Another way that people have used to keep track of things is your journal or your date book. Again, you can buy this at an office supply store. But with the date book, it does become cumbersome. And it's hard to find the information because you have to go back to each individual day to pull things together to see what you have spent and what you have collected. The cumbersome part comes in if your receipts and your expenses, you take those and you just throw them into your journal or your date book, you have the chance of losing that information or it falling out, and you just pick it up and stick it on the wrong page. Even if you staple them in or paper clip them in, it's just a cumbersome way. But if this is the only thing that will work for you, then I would definitely give it a try. The other thing too is there are programs that you can use on your computer. In doing this, you want to purchase an accounting program that is easy to use. And I can't stress the easy enough. One of the products that comes to mind that I think everybody's heard of is QuickBooks. And we will go into some software that you can look at to purchase, and it's very inexpensive. Most of the accounting programs will feed up to a cloud if you want to do it that way. But what I want to go into right now is the use of a spreadsheet that you can use through Microsoft Excel. And there are other spreadsheet programs, but I have used Microsoft Excel. And in fact, if you go back out to SOCWA, there is a record keeping system that's a spreadsheet run by Excel that I created that's available for your use. So I've pulled up some of the slides, and I'm sorry it's small, but like I said, you can get a copy of this either off the SOCWA website, or if you can't find it there, I have sent a copy to Victoria, and it is free for her to distribute to anyone. I created it for myself, and I'm glad to share it. So in the software, or in the Excel spreadsheet, the very first page of my spreadsheet, I've explained on this page, what everything means. If you go down the first side of it, the artist name, the income, no information necessary. As far as what that is, the year, I usually place the calendar year in the field next to the year, and then start with the customer. So what I'm going to do, so that you see this, the instructions are on the front. The next page goes into the income page from the instructions for artist record keeping. And I have a place on this page for you to put your name, the year that you're working with, and what type of income it is, whether it's teaching or whatever. You can certainly put it all on one page. The keeping a record of your income serves two purposes. First of all, for reporting your income, but also to keep track of the customers that you have had, or you have, what they have purchased, and then if you want to do advertising or you're having a special sale, then in your income records, you have your customer information. So very simple, and it's things that we've just talked about. I've got a field for the date, who you received the money from, a description of the income. Again, it could be the name of the piece that you sold, or you could just put sales or grant money, whatever it happens to be, the price, the sales tax, and then that total. You'll see that I have yellowed it out. That way, if you put the price and the sales tax in, it gives you the total of what you charged the person. You don't have to add. And then in the form of payment, you can put the check number or a credit card. But again, do not put the credit card number. I mean, if you want to put XXX and then the last four digits, that's fine. But I would just put credit card. I don't keep anybody's credit card information. And then as far as the customer information, there you can put the name of the customer, their address, their telephone number, their email. So in this spreadsheet, you have everything that you need to know, or that anybody else needs to know, about the income that you've collected. It is set up so that you can add pages. And as you can see at the bottom where it says grand totals, the totals all come from above. So if you've done it correctly, all this will add up, and it will give you a grand total here of what that income, what you have received for the month or the year, depending on how long you want to keep this. I have it set up in the program where it's by month, so you can see each month what you've done, and then there's an additional page that totals it up for you for the year. The same thing for the record keeping of the expenses. Again, all the instructions are on the front, but if you just look at this, it's very simple to follow. You've got the date that you made the purchase. You've got the payment that you made, who you made the payment to, Blick Services, Office Max, whatever it happens to be, and then just a brief description of the expense. And then the total of the payment that you made and the form of payment that you used. For instance, if you wrote a check, a credit card, or it's cash, whatever it happens to be. And the reason this is important is a good example. Just recently, I was looking for something that I paid, and someone said that I had not, and I thought I had. And I went back to my records and saw that I paid it through PayPal. So it was very easy. I went right to my PayPal account, pulled up the expenses, the payments that I had made, and I was able to find it. So when you have to go back to do research, you're not spending all day going, well, did I put that in a check? Did I put that in PayPal? Did I pay it on a credit card? If you put that information in there, then you save yourself a lot of time if you have to go research. Now, on the right side where it says type of expenses, I've just listed a few here, and you can certainly expand this. But the reason that I want to know the type of expenses is so I can see how much I'm spending on certain items. If I'm paying fees out for, this is a good one, fees for seminars and workshops. If I'm paying out a fee, if I'm paying for a workshop, paying for a seminar to expand what I'm learning, which is deductible if you're an artist in business, I want to know how much I'm spending on that to see if I'm spending much more than I'm gaining any benefit. Again, this is going into analyzing what you are doing to create your art. The same with advertising and marketing. Maybe I'm spending too much or too little in this area to get my product out and to advertise and support my art. Miscellaneous could be anything. It could be those one-off items. Then again, you've got a column here that's yellowed out because it's locked, and the information from the total of the payment and will come across here and be able to give you a grand total of what you've spent for the month or the year. And again, the whole reason that I set up this Excel spreadsheet, and if you are versed in Excel, take this information, spread it out however you want, add additional information. But this is so simple as to just what you need. It does not have to be any more complex than this. And then with all of this record keeping in a ledger of some sort, you can put your actual receipts in a binder of sorts. Now, I told you that the very last page that I have in my Excel spreadsheet, this is where everything is totaled. From each sheet, I have this yellow area set up. There's a formula in here that all those expenses, if you do it by month, each month will come in and add up. I keep pointing with my finger. You guys can't see. This will total up to what I have spent for the entire year. As I said here, this is a summary of the information coming from all those other tabs. Keeping it this way, you'll see that there's a line here for all of your income, not broken out into the different kinds, all of your expenses. And then this field, net income or loss, tells you whether you have spent more that year or you have collected more income. This is what would be reported with detail on your Schedule C. If you're not to the point where you think you need to file a Schedule C, or you're not really into it as a business, it's still more as a hobby, this information is still important to you so that you know whether you are making money at anything or if you're just spending a lot of money and not producing things that could be of value to someone else. Again, that definition to me would be a hobby. If you're doing it for hobby, then you don't have to worry about it. But it's something as artists that we do want to think about, because we create for ourselves first and foremost. But if people are interested in what we're doing, then we want to make sure that they get value by purchasing your art, and that you are covering some of your expenses. And then at the bottom, sorry. Hang on. There we go. At the bottom, you can see that I have a place for sales tax collection. So one line will say, this is what I've collected in sales tax, and then any payments that I've made out. And it comes from another line on your expenses. And then this will tell me whether I've overpaid or underpaid what I owe to a sales tax agency. So let's talk a little bit about software programs. I've mentioned before, and I know I keep repeating myself, but I really want you to understand that inexpensive but good software is what you want. It has to be user-friendly. You don't want to spend a lot of time trying to learn a computer program because that's just going to stress you out. There's checkbook programs that may work for you, especially if you're still doing it as a hobby. Those two, it's called Money, and the other one is called Quicken. And both of those work just like your checkbook. In fact, you may be using it for your own personal financing anyway, but you can set up a portion so that you can put your expenses as far as an artist. Accounting software changes all the time. They're coming up with new programs, new ways to do things. And I did some research using Forbes for what they're saying is the best accounting software for 2023. But of course, we're only 1 month into it. And they are saying that the best for ease of use is something called FreshBooks. I am not familiar with this. If you're self-employed, which most of us are, there's a program called Neat. And then for a startup business, it's I think it's Cashew. But what I have found over the years, I've been using it and have recommended it to my clients, is QuickBooks. QuickBooks is so easy to use, and it can grow with you. QuickBooks can be as simple as putting in your income and putting in your expenses. You can actually set the program up to write checks for you. You can use it to send out invoices to your customers. You can set up an advertising system where you can send letters out to your customers. It will grow with you. So once you know QuickBooks and the simple part of it, then you can expand as your business does. QuickBooks is so familiar to people that if you don't want to take care of it yourself, most accounting firms know how to use it, and you can always find someone that you know that can do QuickBooks for you. It's just it's a very robust system, and it is inexpensive, and it is user friendly. You can also get a version that goes right to the cloud, so you don't even have to keep it on your own computer. So I always like cartoons. I'm a little worried about my new tax software. It's recommending that I slip across the border into Canada. When you are putting information in and reporting to the IRS, especially the IRS, you do want to be careful that you've reported everything to them. And the joke here, of course, is using the tax software. It may tell you that you're in trouble and you do need to escape and go across the border to Canada. But I guess being in Mississippi, you might want to escape and go to Mexico. So a couple final thoughts, and I'm open to all kinds of questions. If you're overwhelmed, even with this presentation, ask questions. If you have the question, I'm sure somebody else does. You always want to talk to a financial person that you trust. You can always go through the phone book. It shows my age. You can always go into the internet and find someone that's a financial person. But if you don't know that person and you don't know someone who knows that person, you may want to think twice, because this is part of your own personal being. This person you are hiring to help keep you out of trouble with sales tax agencies and with the IRS, and to help you either grow your business or keep it right where it is. Bookkeeping for Dummies, I often tell people this is a good book. It breaks it down so that you can understand it with pictures and all. Again, when you're shopping for a CPA or a tax preparer, a tax preparer does not necessarily have to be a CPA, but you want to make sure, first of all, is that they're licensed, and most important, that they're experienced in the taxation of artists, because there are things that will come up that not treated properly could inadvertently get you into a lot of financial problems. And as a final note, you want to make sure that if the IRS ever does come in to audit you, the whole purpose for you keeping business expenses, other than to find out if you're making money on your art, is to have proof that these are business deductions for you, and that what you've collected as income and what you have spent out is properly recorded, and you have to document and show to them that this is actual expense, actual income. If not, they have a formula, and I'm not sure how they do that, but they will calculate what they think your income should have been and what your expenses should have been, and then they will charge taxes on that. And that's the last thing that you want, because honestly, the IRS agents really do not know individual experiences, individual sales information. Each person is individual. Each person is different. So those are some final thoughts to keep. Now, with all this said, how do I get started? Well, what you want to do is sit down once a month. Don't make it an everyday thing. You don't even have to make it an every week thing. If you can get started by just sitting down once a month and write all the sales receipts and all your expenses into a ledger book, which is a manual system, or if you are confident enough to do it on the computer, do it on the computer, but gather all that information and just make it a once a month experience. We'll call it an experience. I do it when I'm sitting in front of the TV in the evening. I just pick one evening that I'm going to sit there and just type information into the system, and I'm done. So every year I make the same mistake on my tax return. I try to do it myself. I can't express to you enough as to, again, going back to saying, reach out for help, even if it's just for advice. You want to make sure that you are not overwhelming yourself and that you're not missing something. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. And one of the last things that I will say, other than answering questions, is if you need help at the end of this presentation that I think Victoria is going to send out, I have given you my email, and I am definitely open for questions. Just one-offs or whatever it happens to be. I generally don't charge I do not charge for short questions, just what do you think of? But if you get into something that you need more advice on or more consulting on, we can work out a fee. But, right now, I'm sure you just have a lot of questions and you're not sure. Please feel free to contact me. I'm open for you. Being an artist and a financial person, I can give you a short, easy answer or send you to someone that can help you. So with that, let's go back to any questions that anyone has.
So I'm not seeing any right now, but while y'all might be thinking, I did just want to reiterate what Joyce said, is that yes, we have your emails. When you registered for this Zoom, we got your email. So I'm going to be sending a follow-up email with the Excel that Joyce referred to, her PowerPoint, and also a link to see the recording of this talk, because maybe it'd be helpful to pull it back up whenever you're filling out the Excel, just to orient yourself in that document. So, and I'm still not seeing questions.
Okay, and while we're waiting for a few questions to come up, when I developed the Excel spreadsheet, I did this probably, I'm going to say 10, 15 years ago, and I worked with someone who did not know Excel at all. So once I developed a part of it, then I would give it to her and say, okay, just with the information that I gave you, see if you can get through what I'm asking, or telling people that they need to keep track of. And she didn't have very many questions, and the questions that she did have, I went back and I further explained or made it easy for people to use.
Okay, so we do have some thoughts from Austin, who's like, no more questions for myself, but I would just like to thank you, both you, Victoria and Joyce. I've learned a lot from this meeting, and best wishes to everyone. Thank you so much, Austin.
Thank you, Austin.
We have a question from Kathleen. If you host a conference and people pay for classes, would that qualify for receiving taxes?
No. Again, I would put that down as income and expenses. That will, let me go back. No to sales tax, yes to federal income tax. If you're talking about a business, if you're talking about a nonprofit that offers seminars and classes, that needs to be reported as income on a federal tax return. And of course, the expenses would go against that. But yes, that is an income.
All right. And then Joe just commented that she loves Excel, and this is what I emailed to my CPA. So
Oh,
that's good to
beautiful.
know.
It's so easy. I mean, you can spend a lot of money. And like I said, you can get an expensive program. QuickBooks is really good. But if you're versed in Excel, it is the easiest thing to use to keep track of all this. It's great.
And so just while we wait to see if there are any other lingering questions, I just wanted to mention that Joyce, my colleague Kristen, pointed out that your conversation will dovetail beautifully with a webinar we have planned for March on self-employment tax and tax deduction. So that will be like a deep dive. February, yes, in March. We'll do that right before the April tax deadline. And we also have one before that in February 21st. We'll have another webinar with grant writer Bob Arnold, and he'll discuss tips and strategies for polishing grant applications. And that'll be perfect timing right before the March 1st deadline. So yeah, just wanted y'all to know that, and you will be getting more information on it as you've signed up for this webinar, and we have your email now.
That's great. I'm so glad that that works out, because again, calling this record keeping 101, I certainly did not want to get into the tax aspects of anything, but just making you aware and in putting a grant together, because I do this also. Writing up what you intend to do or why you want the grant is wonderful, but you have to be able, I've not seen a grant yet that didn't ask for a budget page. And that seems to be the hardest thing for artists to put together, is the budget side of it. Understanding, well, what do I need to purchase? One of the questions that I had in one of the seminars was, well, what if you use found objects? Well, you didn't pay anything for it, so you can't use it as a deduction. But you can certainly add that into the price of your income even though it's a found object. So,
yeah, found object art, that's its own world. Well, all art disciplines have their own, particularities to them.
Certainly do.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions right now, so I think.
Well, Victoria and your team, I thank you so much for this opportunity to do this. I feel fortunate whenever I can help other artists understand the financial side of their joy. It's something like I said at the beginning, that what are we doing? Well, we are creating art, but we also have to keep track. And I see somebody raised their hand.
Let's see. We could try this function.
Okay.
Allowed to talk. Elizabeth, if you have a comment, you could go ahead and voice it.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
You have me?
Yes.
Thank you. I had an accountant one time tell me that claiming a home studio inside the home, like a bedroom, that kind of thing, was such a red flag that it wasn't worth doing it.
Well, and that's his opinion. It is cumbersome. But if you are using that room, for instance, my basement is a studio. It is a studio. There's nothing down there but my artwork, my tables, my paints, my fabric, everything. That's the only reason that room is used. I don't have a washer and dryer down there, so I don't do my laundry down there. It is an art studio. So it takes time to work out the square footage with the electricity, other things that you have to pay for that room or part of your house. For him to say that it's not worth it, I'm going to disagree to the point of it may be something to investigate. Yes, it will send up a red flag, but if you have documentation, you're fine.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right,
I see
and
some-
Margaret, if you have any thoughts, please go ahead and voice them.
Margaret, you'll have to unmute.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you and Mac too. It was very helpful. To that last question, my husband was told that exact same thing about his self-employed business, that it's always safer to have a separate building that your office is in. In your case, it's a basement, but not to do your office inside your home.
Absolutely.
That they said, and it was an IRS guy who was retired, and he said it's just
Yeah.
it is a red flag, and it does, you could very well be audited. That's all. And not that you won't get it, not that you won't clear it, but that it is a big red flag.
And Margaret, you're exactly right. It is better to have it outside of your home, to have it as a business. And even if you're not a business, but you're starting out, it's always good to have it in a different location. And as somebody wrote up at the bottom, Kristen, you run into insurance problems too. That's something that we didn't talk about, but if you have the studio in the home, you've got to make sure that that's on your insurance policy, because if it's not and something happens, you're going to run into some issues with the insurance company as well as the IRS. The only reason that I have a studio in my home is that I'm not doing enough work at this point that I need a studio outside the home. And even with that, and I do quite a bit of work, but I'm not claiming my studio downstairs as a deduction. That's not even something that I'm considering. It's part of my house, and it's just convenient that my studio is in the basement. But if I wanted to, and if I was certainly thinking about developing it into a larger business, I would consider and start working with the square footage and putting that in.
Thank you.
Thank you. I saw somebody else had a question, or in the chat, it popped up on my screen real quick. As long as you know the square footage, yes, that's the thing. You have to know the square footage. You have to know, what you are paying as far as not only insurance, but also what you're paying as far as utilities. What are you going to develop that? As far as a fiber artist that I do my own dyeing of fabric, I'm thinking of people who are potters, the use of water, all the different things that you have to consider. And that's why it's good to make sure that you're working with someone that understands that. And again, it is cumbersome, and you may get a red flag from using your home studio, but it's something that you need to consider and think about and know the pros and cons for doing it.
All right, well, no more raised hands, no more questions. So yeah.
Okay, again, I thank you so much for this opportunity, and you will have my information, and please feel free to write to me with any questions or comments and that I might be able to help you with. I certainly will get back to you and give you any support or any direction that you might need. Victoria, thank you for doing this program. I think it's beautiful. I'm so glad it dovetails into the other ones that are coming up.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And thank you all for joining us today. And yeah, keep an eye out for the emails. We'll be sending them. We'll be following it up. All right. Thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and end it now. So have a great day,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.